Hey guys, my name is Mark Todd. This is Mark Said Art. Today we're going to be talking about doing some shading. I just finished this oil painting over here. I want to talk a little bit about how you shade traditionally. We'll give a digital example as well. A few things to keep in mind traditionally that could be a little bit different. And digitally, you just kind of click the color you want. But traditionally speaking, order I think makes a difference. Whether or not you're going dark to light or light to dark or mid-tone to up and down are going to kind of change how your paints mix. If everyone has any questions, feel free to leave a comment. So we'll get into that though. So the first thing I would say with shading is that you want to make it as simple a shapes as possible. So things that were flat, like squares and all that, are much easier to think about. So imagine early video games where they didn't have a lot of details, so everything was kind of a flat surface, and that's how they made it look three-dimensional. That's gonna be the same thing. Just when you look at faces, when you look at all these different things, try to flatten them out and like kind of, I was just somebody's like carving out a wood or carving out clay, and they weren't quite refining it down. You might look and say, well, I can't do that on something like a round ball. But even then, we're going to make three shapes, and even in those three shapes, we can pretty well tell the story. From there, we can blend in those shapes, we can add a bounce light, we can add a highlight, we can do all those different things to make it look more 3D, we can add a shadow in the background, but just try to keep it as simple as you can and then go more complex. And with that in mind, you're going to have to decide when you want to stop. I mean, we could have stopped at the three basic shapes and we would still know what it was. So in this regard, think of it like, almost like a relationship. You have to decide how much work you want to put into it. Maybe it's a good long-term relationship. On the other hand, maybe this is that crush you have that isn't going to give you the time of day no matter how much work you put into it, and you just need to kind of say, okay, that enough is enough. You can go all the way up to photorealistic if you wanted, but it just kind of depends on what your style is and how much you want to detail. Start with something simple and then go up from there, no matter how detailed you want it to be in the end. This isn't the only way to do it, but I think it's a good way to do it, especially if you're kind of getting started. Just keep things simple. All right, guys, so I'm going to go a little bit extra credit on when you are using oils or acrylics or other paints in general. There's some things to keep in mind when it comes to mixing colors, because it's not the digital world where you just click it. If I wanted to shade something, I would want to start with my most vibrant color, and I'm going to mix something over here to the side so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, and I would mix down. Now, here's the other thing. When you have two colors like this, digitally you'll just kind of push them together and mix them. When it comes to paints like oil and all, think of them as like the awkward friends. You have that friend of a friend. You hang out when you have another friend, but you don't hang out together. Okay, that's kind of be a little bit how these two are. So what we're going to do is we're going to, as we're this pretend our palette, we're going to bring this color between the two so it's up in its vibrancy, and you can put that color between and then blend. You'll get a much smoother transition if you do it this way when you're blending than if you just try to push them together. So we're going to want that friend that kind of makes it okay for those other two friends to hang out together. The other thing to keep in mind is you always want to go from your vibrant and light color. I shouldn't say always. I mean, you could do whatever you want, but I would go for my light color, my vibrant color, and I would shade down. The reason for this is, let's say if this was a sphere or something like that, and I'm kind of trying to shade from this light area down to the dark area, and so this color is getting pulled through, it's easy to darken out and get that color I'm looking for. But let's say I started with this color over here. Let's say I start, I'm going to grab something. Let's say I start with something like this, a very dark kind of yellow. And I'm going to mix my shade there first. And so I have this really dark shadowy area, and I want to bring it up to there. How much yellow do you think I have to add to this to get there? Here I went way more than I added the dark. We're not there, right? Because it's no longer a pure color. So I'm going to be constantly hitting this more and more and more and more, and I don't have a gallon of paint to add to this. You'll hear people say, Oh, you can always fix it. Whatever you've done on over here, don't worry about it. You can fix that. Okay, well let's stop that ridiculousness right now. I mean, yeah, maybe if it's all the time and money in the world, you could fix it, but I don't. So if I did make a big globby mess of my colors and I couldn't, and I'm trying to get up here, you know what I'm gonna do? It's real simple. I start over. That's easy. Now, even if this color isn't quite as vibrant, it's gonna be a heck of a lot easier to take something a little bit darker and bring it down than to try to bring something down up. It's just like gravity. It'd be a lot easier to drop something from 1,000-foot building than to throw something up 1,000-foot building. Just go with what's going to naturally happen. It's naturally going to want to go the other direction. So start with your vibrance is my recommendation on your paints or wherever else. Start with your high areas and then go down. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that's just because you're trying to lighten it with yellow. What if you try to use white? All right, well, let's try to lighten it with white. Let's see. Okay, well, this is even a lighter as far as, you know, the value goes, but is that the same? No, it's not saturated more. So even if I keep adding white and, you know, more and more and more, all I'm doing is taking away the vibrancy of the color. So I've lost the intensity of the color. And this is the problem with just saying, oh, I'll just add white to it. It's the same problem with the black. So I'm darkening these with black, and it makes it more muted and muddy. If you want to darken something and keep a lot more of that intensity in the color, you actually want to use other colors. Same thing with lightening. If I want to bring a color up, using yellow to lighten it will help keep it up there. That may or may not be possible, and you may or may not want this. Sometimes you don't want something too garish or too colorful. You want something a little more muted. So bringing up with white in some cases is fine. Bringing it down with the black, you know, can be fine. It just depends, but you are bringing the saturation of the color down when you're doing that. So that's something else to keep in mind, which is going to be different than, won't get too into this piece, not the subject. If I have, you know, a purple here, this is very vibrant, but any direction I move it using colors like these, we're going to bring that down, and you can keep the intensity otherwise. So if I took, we're going to make an orange-ish color, nothing too much, but if I wanted to bring this down, I can actually run over, grab a little blue, and that's not going to be orange anymore. You're going to say, well, you brought that down. So that's okay, because I'm just going to grab contrasting. I can pull it back into an orange, but it's going to be more vibrant than if I start with an orange and I hit it with black. Okay, so we're not going to go too far into that because it's kind of more of the color theory and things like that, but it is part of it. We're talking about shading. So depending on how colorful you want the shading, how muted. Typically speaking, though, in shadowy areas, you're going to have less color. It's going to look weird, probably, if you've got too much saturation in an area that's supposed to be darker. So going this way is fine. And also, keep in mind, you might have a highlight. So if I had a ball here, I would not want to make a glare on that ball with a brighter yellow, more likely, because what the highlight is a bounce of a more pure light, so like an eyeball or something like that, whatever it is. If I put a little bit of white, it's going to be a little bit more of like light is bouncing off of there. So that would be kind of an area where you do want to pull in more of the white so that you don't have that kind of saturation.